All right, so let's dive into the world of wireless infrastructure.
Yeah,
We're talking about Crown Castle,
big player.
a company you might not know by name,
Right.
but their infrastructure is powering your connected world.
Absolutely.
We're looking at their Q4 2024 earnings release.
Yeah, hot off the presses.
We're going to break down what this means for the company, its investors, and maybe even your cell phone bill.
Let's get into it.
So Crown Castle, they've been hinting at a shift.
They've been going through this strategic review of their fiber segment,
Right.
which includes those small cells you see sometimes on streetlights and the fiber optic cables connecting everything.
And investors have been waiting to see what they would do.
On the edge of their seats.
And they did not disappoint.
No, they did not.
They're selling off their entire fiber segment.
$8.5 billion.
Wow.
It's a big number.
That's a lot of money.
It is.
So the small cell business is going to a company called EQT.
Uh-huh.
And the fiber solutions part is being scooped up by Zio Group Holdings.
Splitting it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, two different buyers for that.
So this isn't happening overnight.
No, not quite.
When can we expect it to close?
First half of 2026, but there are still some regulatory hurdles and approvals to jump through.
Okay, so while we wait, let's unpack this massive shift.
Yeah.
Why would a company like Crown Castle, with its hands in so many parts of the wireless world, suddenly become a pure-play tower company?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
Their argument really boils down to a pretty simple idea. They're focusing on what they see as their strongest asset.
Good towers.
Towers.
Yeah.
We're using more data than ever before, streaming, working, connecting on our phones constantly.
Right.
And that demand, it's not going away anytime soon.
So more data equals more need for towers.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a bold bet that the economics of tower infrastructure, at least here in the U.S., are going to outperform other technologies in the long run. By streamlining their business, Crown Castle believes they can squeeze even more profit out of their towers, operate more efficiently, and maybe even pass some of those savings on to you as a customer.
We like that.
We'll see if that actually
I
happens.
think we'll have to wait and see.
Fingers crossed.
Now let's get to the part everyone's really wondering about. What does this mean for people who've invested in Crown Castle?
Ah, yes, the investors. So there's some news that might make some investors raise an eyebrow.
Right.
Starting in the second quarter of 2025, Crown Castle is planning to reduce its annual dividend to about $4.25 per share.
Now, for those of you who might not be familiar with dividends,
Right.
it's basically a portion of a company's profits that they pay out to shareholders on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So a reduction in dividends could mean less money in your pocket if you own Crown Castle stock.
That's true.
Not the most exciting news
Not the best news.
for some investors.
Yeah, but it's not the whole picture.
Okay, there's more.
They're also planning to buy back around $3 billion worth of their own shares
Okay, after the sale is complete.
after the fiber sale is done.
So what does that actually mean for investors?
Well, a share buyback is essentially a way for a company to reduce the number of outstanding shares,
Uh-huh.
which can increase the value of the remaining shares.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a trade-off. You get a lower dividend now, but potentially higher returns later if the buyback strategy pays off.
So less immediate cash flow,
Right.
but possibly a bigger slice of the pie down the road.
That's one way to look at it.
All right, it's a gamble.
It is a bit of a gamble.
But let's shift gears for a minute and take a look at Crown Castle's overall financial performance in 2024.
Okay.
Their results were interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, there were some ups and downs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their site rental revenues,
Yeah,
the money they make from leasing space on their towers, actually dipped a bit.
they dipped.
Part of that was due to cancellations from Sprint after that big merger with T-Mobile a few years back. Ah, yes, the telecom mega merger. Do you think that will impact Crown Castle in the long run?
Hard to say for sure, but consolidation in the wireless industry can definitely have ripple effects. It's something to keep an eye on.
It is.
Now, if you set aside that Sprint impact and look at what's called organic growth,
Okay.
which basically measures how well their existing tower business is doing,
Right.
it was actually a respectable 4.5%. Not bad considering the circumstances.
So things weren't as bad as they might seem at first glance.
No, not at all.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Crown Castle recorded a whopping $5 billion goodwill impairment charge.
$5 billion.
And that sounds complicated.
It does.
But it basically means they had to write down the value of their fiber business because they're selling it off.
Okay.
This happens sometimes when companies sell assets for less than what they're officially carrying them on their books for.
So in Crown Castle's case, they're selling their fiber business for less than what they were carrying it on their books for.
Exactly.
So that's where that $5 billion charge comes from.
Yeah, it highlights the scale of this strategic shift.
It does. It's a huge chunk of change.
It is.
But despite this big charge, Crown Castle is still projecting another 4.5% organic growth for their towers in 2025.
That's right.
And they're expecting even more lease applications as those 5G networks continue to roll out across the country.
Lots of growth on the horizon.
So they're expecting things to pick up, even with the fiber sale on the horizon.
Yeah, it seems like they're pretty confident that this focus on towers is the right move for the future.
Okay.
They're essentially betting that the insatiable demand for more data will drive continued growth for their tower business.
All right, so Crown Castle is streamlining, focusing on towers, and making a big bet on the future of wireless infrastructure. It's a bold strategy for sure,
Bold indeed.
but will it pay off?
That is the question.
That is the question we'll be exploring as we continue this deep dive. Stick with us. So we've established that Crown Castle is making a pretty big bet on the future of wireless infrastructure, specifically with their focus on towers.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out for a second and think about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are some of the potential risks of this strategy?
Well, I mean, one big one is that they're assuming the demand for towers will continue to outpace other technologies like small cells and fiber.
Right.
But what if that doesn't happen?
What if something new comes along?
Yeah, what if some new technology just disrupts the whole game?
I mean, technology is always evolving.
Oh, wait.
Remember when we all thought 4G was the peak of mobile internet?
Right.
And now 5G is here, and people are already talking about 6G.
Exactly, and who knows what's being cooked up in labs right now.
Yeah. So are they putting all their eggs in one basket?
Well, they're definitely doubling down on a particular vision of the future,
Uh-huh.
but you also have to remember they're primarily focused on the U.S. market.
Right.
The economics of tower infrastructure might be different in other parts of the world, where small cells and fiber could play a more prominent role.
So it's a U.S.-centric bet.
Yeah, you could say that.
Interesting. What about their competitors?
Oh, you can bet they're watching this very closely.
I bet they are.
Some might follow suit and double down on towers as well,
Mm-hmm.
while others might see an opportunity in the fiber space that Crown Castle is vacating.
It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
It will. It's like a game of chess.
Everyone's trying to anticipate the next move.
Exactly.
Speaking of moves,
Yeah?
let's talk about one particular financial term that Crown Castle used.
Okay.
Goodwill impairment charge.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Can you explain what that means in plain English?
Sure, it sounds complicated, but it's actually a pretty straightforward concept.
Okay.
Imagine you buy a house for $500,000,
Okay.
but a few years later, the housing market crashes and your house is only worth $400,000.
Okay.
That $100,000 difference is essentially an impairment charge. You have to acknowledge that the value of your asset has decreased.
I see.
So in Crown Castle's case, they're selling their fiber business for less than what they were carrying it on their books for.
Right.
They recorded a $5 billion goodwill impairment charge because the market value of their fiber segment is now lower than what they were originally valuing it at.
So it's more of an accounting thing than a reflection of how well the fiber business was actually doing.
That's a good way to put it.
Now, remember, we talked about organic growth earlier. Well, it's important to distinguish that from overall revenue growth.
Yeah.
Organic growth specifically measures how much a company is growing from its existing operations, excluding things like mergers, acquisitions, or divestitures.
Right.
So in Crown Castle's case, they're projecting 4.5% organic growth for their tower business in 2025.
That's right.
That means even without the fiber segment, they expect their core tower operations to keep growing
Yeah, at a healthy pace.
at a healthy pace.
Oh.
That's a key metric to watch because it tells you how well they're actually executing on their core business strategy.
It is. It'll be interesting to see if they can hit that target.
This is all really insightful. Thanks for breaking it down.
No problem.
You mentioned earlier that the economics of tower infrastructure might be different in other parts of the world.
I did.
Can you elaborate on that?
Of course. So in some countries, the population density is much higher,
Okay.
and the cost of building and maintaining large cell towers can be really prohibitive.
Uh-huh.
In those cases, smaller cells, which can be attached to existing infrastructure like streetlights and utility poles,
Right.
might be a more cost-effective solution.
And it's about finding the right technology for the right environment.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution in the wireless world.
Right. What works in the US might not work in Europe or Asia.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that we need to think globally when we analyze these kinds of business decisions.
Absolutely.
What works in one market might not translate to another.
It might not.
This is also a good reminder to stay informed about global trends and developments in the wireless industry.
It's a constantly evolving landscape.
It is. But there's one more piece of the puzzle I want to explore before we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We talked about potential disruptors to Crown Castle's tower-focused strategy.
We did.
But what about potential disruptors to the wireless industry as a whole?
Oh, that's a fascinating question, and it gets to the heart of what makes this industry so dynamic and unpredictable.
I mean, there are always unforeseen factors that could emerge and shake things up.
Right, like imagine a world where we've reached peak internet
Okay.
and people start to consciously reduce their data usage.
Okay.
Or what if a new technology comes along that allows us to transmit data wirelessly without needing towers or fiber optic cables at all?
Okay, now those are some seriously disruptive scenarios.
They are.
But are those realistic possibilities, or are we talking science fiction here?
It's hard to say for sure what the future holds, but it's important to remember that the technology landscape is constantly shifting.
Right. What seems impossible today might become commonplace tomorrow.
You're right, we can't predict the future, but we can try to anticipate potential challenges and opportunities.
And that's precisely what Crown Castle is trying to do with their strategic shift.
Yeah, they're making a calculated bet on the future, but they're also aware that things could change.
Right.
They're not naive to the potential for disruption.
Not at all.
So what does this mean for investors who are trying to make sense of all this?
I think it means doing your due diligence, researching the company, and carefully considering the risks and rewards before making any investment decisions.
Right.
This deep dive is a great starting point,
It is.
but it's just the beginning of your journey of understanding this complex and ever-evolving industry.
Well said. Now let's shift our focus to a specific risk factor that could impact not just Crown Castle, but the entire wireless industry.
Okay.
What if something happens that significantly reduces people's willingness or ability to use mobile data?
Oh, that's a really interesting point, and it's something that's often overlooked.
We tend to assume that mobile data usage will just keep growing indefinitely.
Right.
But there are potential scenarios that could throw a wrench in those projections.
Like what? Give some examples.
Well, one possibility is a major economic downturn.
Okay.
If people are struggling financially, they might cut back on discretionary spending, and that could include things like data plans.
Would-
They might opt for cheaper plans with less data or even switch to Wi-Fi only devices to save money.
Yeah, data plans can be a significant expense for many households.
They can, and if you multiply that across millions of customers,
Yeah.
it could have a noticeable impact on overall data usage. Another potential scenario is a major privacy scandal or data breach
Ooh.
that erodes people's trust in mobile networks.
I hadn't thought about that.
It's a real concern if people start to worry about the security of their data. They might be less likely to use their phones for sensitive activities,
Right.
like online banking or shopping.
Yeah. And even if the security concerns are unfounded, the perception of risk can be just as damaging as actual risk.
Exactly. It could lead to a decline in data usage and a shift towards more privacy-focused technologies.
So it's not just about technological disruptors.
Yeah.
It's also about societal shifts
Yeah.
and how people perceive the value and risks of mobile data.
Precisely, and that's what makes this industry so fascinating to analyze.
Ah.
It's not just about bits and bytes and cell towers, it's about human behavior economics and the evolving relationship between technology and society.
Those are some really thought-provoking insights.
Mhm.
So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, we've explored the potential risks and implications of Crown Castle's strategic shift,
Yeah.
not just for the company, but for the wireless industry as a whole.
For everyone.
We've talked about technological disruptors, the importance of global perspectives, and the potential impact of societal shifts on data usage.
Lots to think about.
And we've highlighted the fact that there's no crystal ball when it comes to predicting the future.
No.
There are always unforeseen factors that could emerge and change the game. But by thinking critically about these potential scenarios, we can gain a deeper understanding of the dynamics at play and make more informed decisions, whether we're investors, consumers, or just curious observers of this rapidly evolving industry.
Right. And now on to the final part.
As we've been discussing, Crown Castle's big move and the future of wireless. It's made me think about something.
Yeah.
We talk about this insatiable demand for data,
Uh-huh.
but what does that really mean for us?
For us as individuals,
Yeah, as individuals, like, are we becoming too reliant on these devices?
on this constant stream of information.
Yeah, what would happen if for some reason that stream was disrupted or even disappeared?
I mean, it's an interesting question.
It is.
We've become so accustomed to instant connectivity.
Right,
It's hard to imagine life without it.
right.
But history shows us that societies have adapted to major technological shifts before, and they can do it again.
I mean, think about it. Just a few decades ago, the internet as we know it didn't even exist.
Yeah.
People communicated in completely different ways, and they still managed to build relationships, conduct business, and live fulfilling lives.
Absolutely.
So who knows what the future holds?
Right.
Maybe there will be a backlash against the constant connectivity.
A movement towards digital minimalism.
Yeah, where people consciously choose to disconnect and engage more with the physical world.
It's possible.
Maybe we'll see a resurgence of face-to-face interactions, a revival of letter writing, a return to simpler forms of entertainment that don't rely on screens and data.
Or maybe the pendulum will swing in the opposite direction and we'll see even deeper integration of technology into our lives.
Right, blurring the lines between the physical and digital realms even further.
The metaverse, augmented reality, virtual experiences that feel as real as the physical world.
It's mind-boggling to think about the possibilities.
It is. And as we try to make sense of these potential futures,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that technology is a tool.
Right.
Like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
So ultimately, it's up to us as individuals and as a society to decide how we want to use these tools and what kind of future we want to create.
That's a powerful message, and I think it's a fitting note to end our deep dive on.
I think so too.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from Crown Castle's strategic shift to the broader implications for the wireless industry and beyond.
We've analyzed financial data, explored potential disruptors, and pondered the evolving relationship between technology and society.
But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: the future is not predetermined.
Yeah.
It's shaped by the choices we make today.
So as you go about your day, as you scroll through your phone, as you connect with the world around you, take a moment to consider the impact of your choices.
Are you using technology to enhance your life, to connect with others in meaningful ways, to create a better future?
Or are you letting technology use it in? You dictate your time and attention and shape your reality in ways that you may not even be aware of.
These are the kinds of questions that we encourage you to keep exploring long after this deep dive is over.
Because ultimately, the future of wireless technology, and indeed the future of our world, is in our hands.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking. And remember, the journey of knowledge never ends. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.